not necessarily true. But I figured this would be an interesting take. So I generally think, no, I'm not going to make use of AIs in workshopping. Sorry, because if they're all trained on the same data and they don't necessarily think creatively, to me, that doesn't really strike me as actually brainstorming. So often, I like to break away from things going on and just talk about an interesting study here or there. And usually when I go look for some interesting things and talk about some of the oddities about it, I go and pull up Science Daily, which has usually got some really great stuff, or I go to SciWorthy, or I go to a few other different places. But this caught my attention in thinking about education in particular. And AI being the hot topic that it is. So I figured this would be a nice change of pace and a nice short video to kick off the week with something a little bit more lighthearted and cerebral at the same time, I think. Hey, Dave, I've got an idea for you. What's the potential of AI-led workshopping? Now, a lot of you probably know of workshops, which is the whole idea of, folks getting together into a room to generate ideas, solve problems, address a topic, things like that, which is a little bit different from a conference, which is where folks get together and mostly share their results on different ideas. Workshops can be applied to just about anything in here. So this is where I find things interesting. In a paper published in JOSPT Open, the Journal of Orthopedic and Sports Physical Therapy, interesting place for this, UTS Graduate School of Health senior lecturer in physiotherapy, Dr. Joshua Pate, and PhD candidate Rebecca Fechner, I think, write that AI chatbots offer a novel avenue for idea generation, simulating multidisciplinary workshops that traditionally require significant time and resources. This is where it gets interesting, because they're talking about multidisciplinary stuff too. Hi, Luna. There's a cat running around under my feet. Sorry. That it never fails when I'm recording. We sought to simulate a multidisciplinary workshop on a complex clinical research question using three freely available AI chatbots, ChatGPT, Bing Creative Mode, and Google Bard, aiming to broaden and accelerate the co-generation of ideas, Dr. Pate said. Now, just to recap here, ChatGPT, Bard, and Bing's Creative Mode are all large language models, as it were, or LLMs. Language learning models. LLMs is what it is. If I recall correctly. If I have the acronym, I apologize, but they are basically about text, is what it is, more than anything. They are not verbal, although I would not doubt it if somebody attached a voice box to one of these things at some point. And those kinds of things. So we're using them, and don't forget with an AI that an AI is in effect a model itself, and it is only as good as the data it is trained on. And so that is the point to make on that. Our focus was on AI's practical applications in educational and clinical settings, particularly to address the challenge of pain in schools. That is the challenge of pain in schools. Somebody else would have to tell me that. I don't know what that one is. But the findings likely generalize for wider applications. Essentially, anyone wanting help brainstorming on problem-solving policy or practice. We found that different chatbots provided some different responses to each of the prompts, but overall, the most prominent responses were similar. In our simulation, they consistently suggested an online platform or curriculum for pain science education in schools. How am I not surprised at that? And here's the thing about that. As I mentioned before, right, the AI bots are all dependent upon the data that they are trained on. And they may be very different, which inherently means that they are dependent upon what decisions were made in providing specific data for them to be trained on. In other words, was some data excluded and not others? And given, you've probably seen news articles in the last few years about AI and whether or not it has been, how shall we say, biased by its makers, which is to say the creators of these only allowed certain things or set certain rules or all sorts of things like that. And if those folks tend to be from the same perspective, well, then the same problem persists for all of them, and they end up with similar results. In a way, it is somewhat alike to if you're thinking about a group of scientists, and, as Jean and I talked about the epistemic benefits of ideological diversity recently, one of the notes in there is, you just have one group of people all thinking the same way, you're not anywhere near as likely to get to the right answer to the question. If you're doing some workshopping, you're trying to answer a question, figure out what you need to do to answer a question, or even solve a problem, which is what they're talking about here is apparently the challenge of pain in schools. Again, what is there a pain therapy something, or is this talking about pain in medical schools, or what is it? Pain education in medical? Anyway, not entirely sure. They weren't very clear on that front when they wrote this article. I don't put that up to the researchers as much as I put that up to whoever wrote the Science Daily article. But anyway, the pain science education, I'm guessing this has to do with med schools rather than like K through 12 education or anything like that. But anyway, if you are, working with a whole bunch of people that have the same thoughts about something and don't have any ideological diversity, then they have then you're kind of stuck in a bias, if you will. And you're not checking any of your own biases, or at that point, the biases of the group. And this is pretty much the same kind of thing, but with an AI that's been trained, 3 different AIs that have probably been trained all about roughly on the same data, right? And that would then mean that they're all coming at it from the same perspective. Now, I'm only using perspective because that's the only word I can think of that would fit, because it doesn't think. Just to make a point, it doesn't think. It is a model still. So it is a model that is trained on other data. It doesn't necessarily have the ability to think as creatively as a human brain would, but either way, you end up coming with things from the same perspective with all 3 of those chatbots. There we go. And so I don't think the following conclusion that they make here is necessarily correct. So the consistency in responses suggested some reliability of the chatbots in co-generating ideas, while the differences between chatbots offer a range of perspective, enriching the brainstorming process. Well, no, it actually didn't. It sounded like it didn't get there because all the responses were similar. It sounded like it didn't actually get there in the idea generation process at all. So I don't think that statement is necessarily warranted. Again, I haven't looked at the full paper, so I could be wrong. But co-generating ideas may be reliable that you get to the same ideas, but that doesn't mean you get a full breadth and depth of brainstorming that you would with folks who have very different perspectives. These freely available chatbots are accessible tools for broadening participation in idea generation across various domains. While the technology might not be good at the details right now, the chatbots are very good at finding new perspectives and connecting dots in previously unexplored ways. That doesn't follow from what was said before. Again, I could be wrong. Please tell me if I'm wrong. Dr. Pate said the strategy highlights the potential for AI to contribute to educational strategies and clinical research. Okay, so this is about medicine then. Medicine and medical school. Leveling the field for resource-limited settings. By demonstrating the chatbot's ability to seemingly simulate complex workshops, we provide a proof of concept that could influence future research methodologies and policymaking. That's presuming an AI will continue to act like a person, which is also not necessarily true. But I figured this would be an interesting take. So I generally think, no, I'm not going to make use of AIs in workshopping. Sorry, because if they're all trained on the same data and they don't necessarily think creatively, to me, that doesn't really strike me as actually brainstorming in the slightest. So I would like to see more than just that. And maybe I'll go dig into the article itself. But what do you think? Do you think AI bots can brainstorm? Let me know what you think. Hit the like button on the way out the door, comment on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, all that lovely good jazz. Until next time, I'm Adrian. May you stay curious.